Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be doing a tier list ranking all of the books in the Cradle series by Will Wight. Now, a couple of preamble words before that. First of all of the series is pretty good. I mean, it's absolutely worth reading, even though there's books that I like less than others, and you'll see why. I just find this series to be incredibly worthwhile, especially if you like anything like progression fantasy, if you like worlds and combat systems inspired more in martial arts, if you like characters that just get stronger as things go, but without a chosen one prophecy or anything like that. So if you want that, then you absolutely should read this series, and the writing just gets progressively better, and I think some of that will reflect in the tier list at least. But yeah, just incredibly worth it. The other thing is, this is obviously my personal opinion. You will probably differ on almost all of these items, and this is fine. I mean, it's cool that you have your own preferences here. And before I start my ranking, I want you to pause this video and either comment your tier list, or if that's too much, just tell me which book of these 12 is your favorite and which is your least favorite and why. I think that'll help inform us what kinds of preferences we have, what our favorite characters are, for example, which I think is incredibly important. So I want to foster discussion here. Know that these are just my opinions and that that's fine and they're just as valid as yours, and that's cool and dandy. So let's get started here. Let's get started with Unsouled. So the first book in the Cradle series is also kind of my least favorite here, personally. I like a lot of what Unsouled is trying to do. It's just that the characters are a little miserable here. I mean, in general, everyone kind of sucks. Everyone's a little too intense. And that's kind of why I didn't love Unsouled. It's still a good read. It still has satisfying moments and everything. The ending's pretty cool and it starts a good introduction to the world. And what I do think Cradle does well is it starts revealing the larger world and the larger plot slowly, so it's easier to digest instead of getting stuck on the world building. But here, there's just not much of anything except pretty much good fights and some semblance of really good characters here. It's enough to keep you reading. I just don't think Unsouled is great because it doesn't have the charm in those characters that they have later on, which is where Soulsmith actually gets a little bit better. So Soulsmith, I mean, in reality, it's a pretty good book because it introduces Ethan, who is probably one of the most fantastic characters in this show or in this series as a whole. And yeah, I mean, it's a little better. It's not great yet, and the reason why is because those character interactions haven't been cemented to be as great as they can possibly be. Which is where Black Flame comes in. Black Flame is I'm gonna put in the A tier. I think Black Flame is fantastic. It's just such a great book where the characters are really pushing themselves further than they ever have before. And the promises that are made at the end of Soulsmith are worked towards at the beginning of Black Flame. So I think there's a great relationship there where the author is making us a promise. It's showing progress towards that promise. And I think that's incredibly important. Now, Sky Sworn, I'm going to put it in the low C tier. I liked this book a little bit less even than Soulsmith. The reason why is because the promise that is made at the end of book 2 is fulfilled at the beginning of book 4, and it feels a little weird, especially because the most fun and climactic parts at the beginning of book 4 happen at the happen at the very beginning. So the rest of the book feels like kind of interesting, but not as interesting, and it's a little choppy with the pacing. It's okay. You're still introduced to a bunch of important characters later on, and I think that's super relevant. But just because of that, I just have it in the C tier for myself personally. However, Ghostwater, on the other hand, is pretty much S tier. I mean, the cool part is it's almost a self-contained story here, which I find super interesting. And it's such a monumental advancement of character for our main character Lyndon, where he truly is meeting new characters, challenging himself, seeing how he can actually further his advancement and further his process of getting stronger through unexpected allies, through this figuring out new methods of everything, right? And because it's such a self-contained story, and yet it is linked so beautifully with the rest of the implications in the rest of the series, it's just great. It just ties that knot perfectly for what is almost the first half of Cradle. And to finish up the first half of Cradle, we have Underlord. Underlord, I'm going to put on the B tier. I think it's great. It shows how our characters that we're following progress to the level of Underlord and how they really go to that next level of power there. and what sacrifices they actually have to make. I think the theme here is sometimes sacrifice, it's sometimes self-discovery and realizing why they're doing what they're doing. It asks really good questions. The action here, I think, is a little worse, and the world building, I think, stops a little bit where it doesn't get as interesting until later. So we're naturally expanding things here. They're in an okay environment, but it's just not that as interesting as the amazingness of Ghostwater, right? Or what's going on in Black Flame. So just because of that, I'm gonna put it in B tier, even though I still think it's really good. Now we get to more interesting Uncrowned put it here. No, I'm gonna put it ahead of Black Flame. Uncrowned is insane. I mean, we have all our main characters going to this tournament where they're gonna fight other underlords, so other promising, powerful people, and yet they're all kind of pawns in these larger games. And then you see these games that they have to participate in, these tournaments. So it's almost like a sports underdog story in a way. And I think it does it really well. I think it's very satisfying. It doesn't end in a satisfying way because you still have so much more to go, and yet it has such an emotional roller coaster of an ending. Even though it doesn't wrap it up, it has one of the most great fights in the series so far, honestly, and one that really challenges the characters further. So, without any spoilers, definitely Uncrowned, super interesting. But Wintersteel, oh Lord, at the end of this book, this is probably the most satisfying reading high I've felt in a long, long time, honestly, you know? And a little more in that context of it being almost a sports underdog story. But yeah, the ending of Wintersteel is pretty much perfect. It's so successfully perfect. I love it, and everything leading up to it is so great for character growth. And I think the true success of Cradle all the way through the first 8 books is tying character growth to power, but not just training, not just fighting, but actually needing that level of introspection to realize why you are the way you are, why you want the things you want. So this is almost like a culmination of it. Bloodline, I like a little less. Between the high B tier and low A tier. I'm gonna put it in the low A tier here. So the thing about Bloodline is it's pretty good because the characters go back to where they started, right? Lyndon started in his Sacred Valley. Now they're all going back to Sacred Valley because there's insane implications for everyone at the beginning of the book. Some of the prophecies and promises made at the very beginning of the book are coming to reality here in Bloodline. It's crazy, man. I mean, the events of this book are so fun, and yet you are coming off of a reading high that does get similar towards the end of Bloodline, but it's not in the same caliber, and the conflict isn't truly resolved by the end of Bloodline, so it may not feel as satisfying, if that makes sense. Now we go to Reaper. Reaper is such a fun book because it's one of the first books that is more so about other characters than it is about our main two that we've been following throughout the series, Yeri and Lyndon. And it gives you such a beautiful window into this other incredibly important character. It has such a crazy ending, such a crazy twist that, I mean, you could see coming, especially if you've been around the internet while you're reading the series, but it's so interesting. I love it. It's great. You should just keep reading at this point. And I mean, we're getting to the highs of Cradle. So here we have Dread God. Dread God gets a somewhere between high A tier and low S tier. I'm gonna give it a high A tier. Dread God is so good. I mean, here it's how to go and you're almost at like the most powerful level possible. How do you push yourself even further than that, right? It's so fun to see. It's so insane. And the stage being set for the last actions in the last book. I mean, I remember reading this book before Waybound, the last book, had come out, and the anticipation in my bones, the fact that it had set everything up so nicely for Waybound to just do the layup. And really, Waybound just completely delivers. What a beautiful conclusion this is, truly. And it's a very well deserved conclusion. It's probably the best book in the series, I would say. I mean, tied with Reaper and Wintersteel, and to some extent Ghostwater. Honestly, the S tier, I don't think I have a ranking for these personally. It's just such a great conclusion. They pretty much nail the conclusion for each and every character in a satisfying way. You see what happens to everyone. And some books from Bloodline onwards, honestly, you kind of start getting those satisfying conclusions for many minor characters too. But here it's just so beautiful, such a great ending, so satisfying to see how the characters really take everything to the next level to finally resolve things of cosmic proportions, literally, right? So I love this book. I love this series. What a beautiful culmination. And it shows, I think it shows here that it's books one, two, four, and six that are on the not A or S tier. And then everything after that is just the complete next level, right? And even then, these books, I feel like for most people, Underlord would be somewhere above, maybe even Skysworn. I don't know about these first two. I think people have concluded in general that they're not the best books in the series, and that's also because Will White just got better at writing and because the characters got more interesting, more fascinating. That's a good thing. You want the series to improve as you're reading it. So yeah, if you did read Unsouled or Soulsmith and you didn't like them, my suggestion is to just keep going because it gets better, it gets funner, the character bonds get stronger, the character growth gets even better, and it's just so masterfully wrapped up by the end of it that I can't recommend this series enough. I think I'm gonna miss this series in some way. I feel like I still think about it, even though I finished the last book over a year ago. And yeah, I can't recommend this enough. Please let me know what your tier list was. Thank you so much for watching.